Hello and welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 55. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons, and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. But today we're stepping away from the dark realm, away from the dark energy beings, to hear 4 real-life experiences shared by spirit souls who were trapped within the earth realm. And we're going to look at what kept them here and how they were released to find peace on the other side. Now, you may need a box of tissues for this episode because some of these stories are real tearjerkers. Now, these 4 experiences I'm going to be sharing with you today are all mine and a friend's from within the last 5 years or so. They all have certain elements of despair, sadness, sorrow, and pain. But there's also relief and peace that comes with these experiences. So please bear with me to the end. You're going to love the happy endings. Now, I seem to be a magnet for all levels of paranormal energies, and this includes spirits. And I've found that once spirits understand that you can see them, you can hear them, you can sense them, that often they'll come forward for help. They need some sort of assistance. They want to be heard. Now, the help can be in the form of an acknowledgement of their struggle, assistance to release pain and trauma, or to release an emotional tie that has been holding them here in this earth reality. And sometimes, like these spirits that are here today, they just want their stories told. They want to be heard, and they want to find peace in knowing that someone cares. And I must say that this episode really comes with a very big trigger warning. And this is for anyone who has experienced personal abuse or trauma and grief at the loss of a child. Now, there's no graphic descriptions shared today because I just don't do that. But if there's any information in this episode that upsets or triggers you mentally or emotionally, please see your doctor or a mental health professional. Now, not all spirits are ready to transition. As I discussed back in episode 20 on this podcast, they all have different reasons as to why they're still here in this earth reality. And today we're going to hear the stories of 4 souls who came forward to finally be released from this reality. And they wish now to be with friends and families on the other side. Now, sometimes I think the spirits will look and they will search until the right person, the right living person, presents themselves to be able to help them. I don't know why all people who have psychic abilities or people who specifically transition spirits, why everyone can't do it for all of the spirits. I think that spirits maybe gravitate towards personalities. Maybe they watch you and they like your style, they like the way that you work, they like you as a person. And this is what I find quite often is that I will attract lots of different types of spirits, all for different reasons. Now, that's probably a topic for another podcast episode. I'm going to put that on my list on the side. Now, our first experience today is about a spirit lady, and she's going to share with us her perspective about why she stayed in the earth reality, in her home, in a particular location. It had a very specific calling. It had a very specific meaning to this lady, and I've called her story The Hiding Place. The client named Beck from the other end of Tasmania employed me recently to check her home, and we were looking for paranormal intruders of the darker kind. But whenever I check homes, I always look for all levels of energy beings, whether they're spirits, elementals, cosmic beings, all the different ranges of dark energy beings, because they can all be lurking in the home, on the property, in the outbuildings, anywhere really. So This lady had been experiencing some really strange knocking on the walls in the middle of the night when she stayed in this house. She had 2 houses and she used to travel from one end of the state to the other. So she didn't live there all the time, but she just felt so uncomfortable when she was there that she's like, I just need some peace of mind to know that the house is energetically clean. Now, like I said, she would get strange knocking on the walls in the middle of the night. There'd be continuous sleep disturbances, really bad smells like rancid, rotten egg type smells in a couple of the rooms, and the overall feeling of really being uncomfortable and unsettled in this second home. She emailed me the floor plan of the home, and I set to doing my detective work, as I always do, where I look at defining the core issues of these energetic disturbances. Now, she specified that the smell in the storage room, which was in the middle of the house, was particularly bad. And this is really important, she mentioned the outline of an old, small, now sealed up door in the far wall. This immediately caught my attention, but I kept my paranormal addict in its box, and I went about doing the rest of the house first before I looked into that space, because just the mere mention of it was pinging off my paranormal radar, as I call it. I could tell that there was something uneasy about that door and what was behind it. So I thought it best to leave it and work through the rest of the house, room by room, and I'll leave that area of the house till last. Now, after sort of 10 to 12 to 14 hours of finding and removing the energetic imprints, that's the emotional imprints, trauma imprints, addictions, any sort of other residual energy that is present within every room of the home, it was time to tune into the storage room and this mysterious little doorway leading into a dark space that had been unused for some 30 years. Now, this little space was under a fairly new, I think it was 15 years ago, a fairly newly built staircase that went to the second floor. So it was really quite an energetically clogged area. So this had been a little room that now had a staircase going through it. So it was confused. It's like you're going, what do you mean? How can a building be confused? How can a room be confused? When there's a lot of emotional imprints built up in a room or in a space, and then we go in and we renovate, we're changing the energy of the space, which can sometimes disturb, bring the paranormals to the surface, and just cause more problems. So anyway, let's get back to what we were talking about. Now, that space had been unused for sort of 15 to 30 years. This is what the lady was telling me. She was trying to remember. Her family had lived there for some 40 years. So the house could have been 50, 60, 70, 80, could have even been older. And that little room had always been there. Now, if it's attached to a storage room, it may have been a larder. It may have been where they kept their vino, where they wanted to keep things cold. I mean, who knows? Beck had really highlighted early on, like I said earlier, that the storage room was the main place where she heard constant knocking, the rotten smell. She felt uncomfortable, felt uneasy, didn't like going in there, didn't even like walking past the room. She kept the door closed and locked at all times. But she was also curious about what lay hidden behind that little door that was now under the stairs. Now, focusing on the floor plan and trying to keep my attention on going through my process, not skipping anything to get into that room sooner, I dowsed and I identified the emotional imprints in the storage room. And this little sort of unusual nook under the stairs with this sealed up doorway wanted my attention. Like, it didn't want to wait any longer. You're asking, how do I know that? Is because I was seeing a door in my mind. Now, you're probably all thinking, no, she's just making that up, or she's just wanting to skip forward and go into that room. I have a very specific way that I work to keep me on track. Because I do paranormal work all the time, I live in a heightened energetic sense. Like, I'm grounded into the earth, but I'm living sort of in the crown chakra energy upwards. So I have to keep myself in my body and I have to learn to stay focused. So I always follow a process. Because I'm OCD, that helps keep me focusing on my process. But this door just kept pushing its way into my mind. When things like that happen, I just know that it wants my attention now. Now, I'm saying now because in my mind, out of nowhere, I heard a voice. Now, it was a very clear female voice, as if someone was standing right next to me in my workroom. And this voice said in a whisper, "Shh, he won't find me here." I don't normally hear voices. I'm more a feeler, like you'll hear me talk about in my podcast. I feel energy. But sometimes spirits will have a particular way that they communicate. Some will talk to you and don't use the vision or don't use the feeling or don't use the touch. So they all have different senses that they use. But this lady, it was so clear. And I actually found myself sort of sitting in my chair in a really sort of mild, trance-like state, putting my left index finger to my lips and repeating the phrase that she said, "Shh, he won't find me here," over and over and over again. And you know why this happens? When I tune into homes or I'm doing a personal clearing for a client, you're creating a cording and energy into that home. You're going to feel whatever is in that home. And I only know this from personal experience. I can't quantify it with scientific evidence or backing it up in any way scientifically. I just know that when I tuned into that room, I wasn't looking for a voice. I didn't expect to find a spirit. I go into all of this work with a totally blank mind. So there's no preconceived ideas about what's going to be there. But the way that she whispered when she stood next to me was like, wow. She really wanted my attention. Now, I'm sitting there, and like I said, I'm repeating this phrase over and over again, and I'm kind of rocking gently in my chair. I'm just sitting there rocking, and I'm listening, and I'm feeling this lady's energy. Now, as I said the words, I caught glimpses. And this is not very nice, but it's not very graphic. I caught glimpses of a battered and bruised face of a middle-aged woman. She was face to face with me now, like she was within maybe 20 centimetres of my face. And for a second, she kind of looked up at me through her black and blue swollen eyelids. Like it was really quite traumatic. Her face was very still, very emotionless. And she sensed my presence as much as I saw her image in my third eye. She had found someone that she could talk to, that would listen, that would understand. Now, what she told me, she'd lived in that home many, many years ago before Beck's family. And now in spirit form, she'd found herself repeating old patterns of fear and panic and hiding in that secluded small little space that was now under stairs. She told me that it was the only place that she felt safe when she was alive. Now, she didn't tell me if she passed away in the home, and maybe she didn't remember because they don't always remember how they pass. But her husband had been mentally unstable for most of their marriage, and coupling that with constant drinking to mask his worries and his pain, the excess alcohol and the instability led him to blame his poor wife for his lifetime problems, and he took out all his frustrations on her. Now, you're going to ask me, how do I know that? When I go through homes have history. And the way that I unpack the histories, I look at the emotional imprints. Emotions tell a lot about what's gone on. Now, in that home, from memory, there was lots of despair and sadness and sorrow, which would have been hers. But also there was anger and rage and hostility and hatred and blame that was his. And I saw a man with his right hand firmly grasped around the neck of some sort of bottle of alcohol. I don't drink, so I can't really tell you what I can relate it to. It could have been scotch, whiskey, who knows. But my management team, my spiritual team, will show me these images. And I've had to train myself not to get caught in the emotions of it, not to compromise my work ethic emotionally. I'm here to help this lady. I'm here to help her move on. She's finally ready to show herself and tell her story to someone. If I fall into a blithering mess on the floor because of all the trauma that she went through, how is that helping her? So I'm quite a strong personality, as you can imagine. I see, I feel, I observe, I now document to share with you, and I help these spirits and I help these dark energy beings that come forward for assistance. After telling her story and releasing her pain, her energy felt different. Like she felt relieved. Do you know how when you feel relieved, you go, oh, I just feel so much better. I felt a really deep shift in her energy. She felt more at peace and kind of calm in a way. She just felt calmer. And she was ready now to move on, to be with her grandparents. This is what she told me. She said, I want to go to Pa and Ma. I want to go and see them on the other side. So with free will, she was ready to go. That's all they need, is to release what's holding them here, and their free will takes them to the other side. It's not complicated at all. We as human beings make this whole process of transitioning spirits really complicated. So what I did with this lady is that I suggested that she just close her eyes and focus on Ma and Pa and just see them in her mind. Just see them smiling and welcoming. They're not going to judge her. They're not going to judge what she went through. I said, see them with their arms open and they're welcoming you. And within an instant, she was gone. Like my room where I was working felt totally different after she left. The room felt light, bright, happier. She'd been released from her fear and her trauma and her pain, and she was now a free soul, ready to go and explore the existence on the other side. I really love this work. I have to tell you, it's very tiring, and sometimes I go, why am I doing this? But to have experiences like that, where someone finds you, they find you and they go, you know what? You're the one to help me. I'm like, okay, what do we need to do? And we go through that process and away they go. So that's just beautiful. She is now at peace with her loved ones on the other side. Now, a second experience is a more recent one from October 2023. This is a lady spirit wanting someone's attention and finally getting the help that she needed. I've called her story Eliza's Baby. Now, a friend was down from the north of the state and she wanted to take me to go and visit a local historic site here in Hobart one afternoon. Now, I've never been to this place before, even though I've lived here in Tasmania all my life. I was kind of excited to learn about the early history of this particular site. And my friend loves history, especially our convict history. And she'd been to this place many, many times before. So as we arrived, we parked and we paid the fee to enter the location. And I was instantly pulled to enter a specific side of this site. Now, I was a little bit nervous about going to this place. It's probably one of the reasons why I hadn't been there, because it is a place of trauma from our early convict history, sort of 1788 onwards. And I don't always go places where I know there is going to be paranormal activity, like hubs of paranormal activity. Now, I know I say spirits and dark beings are everywhere. They are. That is just the nature. But sometimes there are these specific hubs of paranormal activity where there's lots of spirits or lots of dark energy beings. And most of the time I just try and avoid them because I have enough to deal with every day. Now, when I go to these places, oh my goodness, all sorts of paranormal beings find and follow me. It's a bit like being the Pied Piper. A paranormal Pied Piper, there's the 3 Ps. And today, as you will hear, was no different. In a good way. It was in a sad way to start with, but then it was in a good way at the end. So it's another one of these stories that might trigger some people, but this lady wanted to be heard. All 4 of these spirits today, their stories that I'm sharing, they want to be heard. Not just by me or by another friend that might have been with me. They want other people. Actually, come to think of it, spirits listen to podcasts as well. So do dark energy beings. They know what we're talking about. So maybe the sharing of these stories will help other spirits find people that can help them. I never thought of that before. Isn't it interesting how we always learn something new? Anyway, back to the story. Like I said, I was feeling a bit nervous. And we entered the left doorway of this particular site. And we were no more than 5 steps in when I saw a woman. Now, she wasn't a living woman. She was in my mind, in my third eye. I can't really tell the difference. I was seeing the surrounding area with my eyes, but I was also seeing her in my head. Now, she was dirty. Like, she was really dishevelled. She looked tired. She looked exhausted from head to toe. And she was dressed in what I would call late 1800s style work clothing. She had an apron on and a long dress to the ground, and she just looked really tired and exhausted. And she was holding out what looked like a baby's shape wrapped in a crumpled white blanket. Now, this woman's face, I will never forget it. She had this really forlorn look of despair. And her outstretched arms showed me the blanket, like she kept pushing this blanket out at me. And it looked like it was wrapped around a baby, but it also felt like there wasn't a baby there at all. The blanket felt empty. Now, I'd stopped. I said to my friend who'd walked ahead, "There's a lady here." My friend looked up and I said, "I think she's looking for her child, possibly a newborn." And in the next second, the spirit lady's image just vanished from my mind. And I'm like, okay, observe, remember. Observe, remember. Because sometimes spirits come back, sometimes they don't. If they haven't found the right person to help them, like I talked about earlier, then they'll keep looking for the person that can help them. So we continue just to explore this rather interesting site. Now, I asked question after question because that's my MO. I want to know the details. And my friend shared her very vast knowledge of this place. And she said that women and babies had been housed in that location in convict times. And many mums and babies had passed through this site. Like this feeling of the despair-ridden lady, it followed me. And as she's telling me the stories of these mums and these babies and how they lived their lives in this place, and it was cold and dark and really traumatising. This is why I don't go to these places, because it's just, I feel the pain of the people that were there. Now, this lady followed me, and I stayed open to any sort of communication that she might have wanted to share, anything else that she wanted to tell me as we wandered around this place, reading the plaques on the walls and reading the information about the people that lived there, and just sort of feeling the energy of each of the areas of this site. Now, we arrived at this location about an hour before closing time, so it was rather a quick visit. Near the end, we saw a very large display on a far wall that noted all of the women's and the children's names who had been through this site. And my friend, rather randomly, like it was so random, she pointed one of the names out and went, "Oh, look at that name. That's a rather interesting name," which I'm not going to share because it was a real person. I don't want to cause any grief to any family. Now, she was drawn to one name in particular, and she just said that name out loud. And I listened as we looked at the display and were sort of wondering about these people's lives. They were really hard, really traumatic lives in this place. Such a sad place to go to. Now, closing time was looming, and the man at the admission desk told us very firmly to make sure that we were ready to be out of there by 5 p.m. And as that time drew near, we moved towards the exit and walked back to the car. Now, driving back to my house, the distressed female spirit was with me again. I felt she didn't leave while we were exploring the site. She sort of blended into the background and just followed at a distance. Now she was in my mind again, and I heard names. I heard Liz, Eliza, Liza, Elizabeth, and then a surname starting with B. Now, I'm not going to share the full name, but I said it out loud to my friend. I said, "I've got names." And I said, I never get names. And it was just so random. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat going, Liz, Eliza, Liz, Elizabeth. And then I said a surname, and my friend's like, what? Who? What's going on? And I just said, she's here. She wants help. She doesn't understand where her baby has gone. Like, she's holding out this white blanket again. And she'd been waiting for years and years and years for someone to take notice of her. Like, she was so vivid. Now, when we arrived home and we sat at the kitchen table, my friend, who's an avid genealogist, like, she scoured these relevant internet genealogy sites that were connected to our local history. And she soon found the lady's name. Like I said before, I rarely get spirit names, but this was so clear. Like, the surname was spot on. Now, this lady's name was Eliza. That's the name she was known by. And her surname did start with a B, and I did get the rest of the name. And my friend also found some really detailed information about what happened to her daughter. And again, I'm not going to share that here. But I will say that the location was a site where care for the children wasn't of a decent quality at that time. And her daughter had passed away quite young. Now, as my friend's reading out the information, and the most interesting thing is that random name that my friend pointed to on that big board with hundreds and hundreds of names, and she went, oh, look at this name. That first name was the name of this lady's daughter. Now, who would think that that could happen? Was my friend being guided by this spirit lady to show her the name of the daughter? Like, I'm getting chills just thinking about this again. It was just one of those experiences that you can't really describe it unless you're there experiencing it. Now, Eliza, the spirit lady, she really listened eagerly to this information that my friend read out about her daughter. And she finally understood what had happened to her missing child. And in that instance, again, there was this big wave of relief. And I felt Eliza was ready to go. She just wanted to go and be with her daughter on the other side. And when she finally let go of that trauma and that pain and all that searching that she had endured for decades, she just let go of this reality and off she went. Like, it's just, you should see the smile on my face. It's just, oh, I love this work. Like I said earlier, it is just so profound to be able to help beings that you can't see. You know, a lot of people don't believe in this. They think it's all a lot of hokum, it's all a lot of rubbish, and oh, she's probably making it up. This is 100% real. This quantifies this lady and her daughter as real living people. And that is what she needed. She needed to know that someone would take notice of her, listen to her, give her some information about what happened to her daughter. And if my friend hadn't have been with me, I wouldn't have known where to look. I would have got on Google and had a good old look, but my friend went straight to the local Tasmanian genealogy convict sites, and she went, oh, I think it was maybe 5 minutes. And she went, oh, there's Eliza, there's the B, yep, there's her surname. This is the information about what happened to her daughter. It's truly amazing. Like, seriously, I was going to have to stop talking. Now, a third experience is another story about a mother and her baby. And this lady got my attention through a phone call, believe it or not. And I've called this encounter, Help Me Find My Baby. I was talking to Jim one morning, and I was booking accommodation for a week-long visit. And I had this sudden vision of a lady in a hospital gown. Now, that's important because I was going to stay in the nurse's home on a hospital site. So there you go. There's another spirit lady that was looking for someone to take notice of her. Now, this lady stood silently in my third eye. Like, she was calm, She was just waiting for me to sort of go, hang on, there's someone here. And I said to Jim as I was talking to him, I stopped in mid-sentence. And I said, there's a lady here and she's in a hospital gown and she's cuddling a blanket. And as soon as I said that, she loosened her hold on the blanket and there was nothing in it. Now, she was holding out this blanket like she was confused and her hands were kind of moving frantically as if she was looking for something. And then she vanished. She vanished from my mind, like my third eye. And I said to Jim, I think she's at your location and I reckon when I get there, she's going to show herself again. Now, isn't it interesting how spirits will some use sound, some use images. Now, I'm very prone to feeling, but I think my second sense that is most strong must be the visuals. So the drive to this location was very long, but it's really nice. I love going to this place. It's very scenic along the way. And when I got there, I went to Jim's house and was knocking on his door. Jim greeted me and he showed me to my room. I always stay in room 22. I don't know why. It's at the top of the stairs and that's the one that I like. Now, that afternoon when I was meeting with my friend Maureen at the hospital, she wanted to show me around the hospital. She said that the spirits there, because she's very psychic, Maureen sees, hears, she gets it all. Now, the spirits at the old hospital in this town, they talk to Maureen all the time because Maureen was a medical professional. So there's all these medical professionals at this old hospital. Now, that is a whole topic for another episode, and I'll get back to you with that one pretty soon. Now, she also wanted to set up these paranormal tours. This is what the spirits wanted. They wanted people to come through the building. They wanted the building to be alive again. And because I'd had some paranormal investigation experience before, Maureen thought that I would be the perfect person to help her look at some basic equipment, how to set it up, where to start, all that sort of thing. Now, the site was an unused medical facility, like I said. What they'd done is they'd built a brand new facility down in the town. And this other facility sat on the hill and it was just there. Now, there are so many resident spirits there. Look, I could get sidetracked here for hours talking about all the wonderful experiences that I had at that location, but we'll do that in the future. But we've got to focus on this lady in the hospital gown today because she was my first spirit connection to this location. So, meeting with Maureen, I shared my vision of this rather confused spirit lady in the hospital gown looking for her baby. And Maureen had done some research into the history of the site. And back in the mid-1800s, sort of right through to the early 1900s, she said that when the mums gave birth to stillborn babies, they were taken straight away from the mums. The mums didn't get a chance to say goodbye. They didn't get to cuddle their little bundles. They were simply left wondering what had happened to them. And their children were buried on the site, and it was all hushed up, and the mums never knew where their children went, which is really quite sad. Really, really sad. But that is the way it was done in those days. Now, Maureen showed me through the location. The building was in fairly good repair. And as we walked around, she showed me the pathology room, the x-ray room, there was the office room. We got to the labour ward. Now, I got chills running all through me. And I said to Maureen, we need to sit in here, in the labour ward. We need to do something in here for this mum and her baby. Now, I didn't know what this something was yet, because my management team this is my spirit management team, they don't always bombard me straight away with all the information. They kind of slip through what I need at the time. I just felt in that labour ward, standing in the labour ward under the lights, that something needed to be done in this room, because this is where the babies were taken away from their mums. And as I said that, Maureen, like I said earlier, who's very, very open to working with the spirit world, now she had a vision of many female spirits in hospital gowns They were all coming forth and they were standing with us in the labour ward. And I was quite shocked. I generally don't work with spirits. It's not my thing. I'm more down the heavy end of the scale with the dark and the demonic beings. But I'm open to working with any spiritual beings. And this lady in the hospital gown showed herself to me, so I knew she needed help. And as Maureen's describing these ladies, I was feeling sort of cool, wafting energy just moving around us. Now, we put our heads together and we thought about how can we help the mum and her baby and all these other ladies and their babies. Now, Maureen and I both agreed to return later in the day to the labour ward with some rather large, comfortable cushions, because there was no way that either of us were going to be sitting on the very hard, very cold floor in that room. Because you've got to remember, this is a building that is non-operational now. So there's no heating. It's cold. It was a cold room. And the spirit presence could have contributed to that coldness. So later in the night, around about 7 p.m, it was dark. So it was about 7:30. We entered the labour ward. We set up the cushions. I'm sitting in the middle of the room. Maureen had her back up against the wall. And we just got ourselves as comfortable as we possibly could. Now, no sooner had we settled than the lady in the hospital gown appeared again. She was in my mind, but she was kind of in front of my body at the same time. She was so real, but she was not real at the same time. It's sort of hard to explain. And she was very calm again. She calmly sat opposite me with her empty blanket. And I sat there with my eyes closed because I find I get distracted really easily. My OCD just sends me off and I get really, really distracted. So I find if I shut my eyes, I could really focus on seeing her face. I couldn't quite tell you the colour of her eyes. They were maybe brown, maybe a little bit of green. She had sort of dark blonde hair, if that makes sense. Sort of like a dark sandy blonde, shoulder-length straight hair. And as I'm looking at this lady, Maureen said that there were more lady spirits coming in, 4, 5, then 6, and she could see them all as plain as day. She said they were sitting in a circle around me, and they all had these white baby blankets, and they were cuddling them. They were cuddling these little beloved bundles. Now, the spirit lady in front of me, this is where it gets really hard to explain, because I'm sitting there with my eyes shut and Maureen's telling me what she's seeing. And all of a sudden, the spirit lady that was sitting in front of me, her blanket now had a baby in it. It had the shape of a baby in it. It wasn't moving, but I could see a little head and I could see a little hand in a little sort of tight fist. This spirit lady in front of me, she held this little bundle. Oh, it was so lovely to see. And you should have seen the joy on her face. Now, the children were buried on the site. So had their spirits transitioned into the afterlife and come back to get their mothers, or had the baby's spirit energy still been on the site? I can't give you that information. I don't know, but I just trusted. When I saw this blanket in front of me filled with this little baby, I knew. I'm like, oh, they've come to get their mothers. It was so beautiful, so beautiful. And each of these ladies, Maureen's telling me what she's seeing with all the other ladies as I'm focusing just on the lady in front of me. They all just vanished. It was like I'm getting these tears coming in my eyes now. Oh my goodness, it was just so profound that these children had been rejoined with their mothers. Their mothers felt fulfilled. They felt whole again. Maureen and I just sat there looking at each other. We're in sort of semi-darkness. And we're just like, wow. Now, our fourth and last experience for this episode today shares a dad in spirit and his love for his baby daughter, and how he stayed at the hospital hoping to get a glimpse of his baby girl. And I've called this story My Darling Girl. Now, this story is set in around about the 1920s, and it's the second sharing today from the now unused hospital location here in Tasmania. And my friend Maureen and I frequented the old hospital often as we discussed with the staff, in spirit form, how we would set up the paranormal tours to their liking and share the story of the hospital and its very alive, bustling spirit staff members. Now, I can't remember the exact happenings of this story because it was a few years ago now, but I'm going to do my best to relay to you Ben's message, what he wants you to hear today. So here we go. Now, in the nursery late one day, Maureen was cleaning and clearing the space. She looked up and she saw a man, a spirit man. Now, he was wearing a big, sort of dirty-looking work coat, and he had sturdy canvas pants, steel-capped boots, and his face had the hard lines of a miner, even though he was only sort of round about the age of 19. Now, this made total sense, because the town was, and still is today, connected to the large mine on the west coast of Tasmania. And in that day, in Ben's day, the hospital would have been the only large medical facility in that area. Now, Maureen and I talked about the hospital often, and she told me that the history that she'd gathered about the hospital, especially in the nursery, only dads were allowed in the nursery after 8 p.m. And this was to give them quality time with their newborns. So there was Ben standing in the nursery, there with Maureen. And she said he had this really gentle, quiet demeanour about him. And he told Maureen that he went to the nursery where his daughter had been when he was alive, and how he missed her so dearly, and he wanted to be with her, but he simply didn't know where she was. Maureen and I met for a cuppa the next day. And she shared about the man standing patiently in the nursery, waiting to see his baby daughter. And I was quite astonished. As I listened, when I'd been in the accommodation that previous night, I'd had a very brief vision of a man fitting exactly the same description. Same face, same hard lines of a miner, same clothing. But I didn't know what the spirit wanted. And because I kind of am a bit like a paranormal Pied Piper, I tend to attract paranormal beings. So I observe them. I kind of wait and see, do they have a story to tell me? Do they have a message? Do they want to transition? But this spirit man simply showed himself in my third eye. He stood there for a few seconds and then he was gone. Now, Ben openly shared with Maureen that his wife had died of a hemorrhage, either during or after giving birth. And what he was worried about was the fact that he would lose his baby daughter, Amanda, to the care of a family member and possibly never see her ever again. Because back in those days, back in the 1920s, other family members' children were often integrated into families by what we would call child services these days, where they knew that the children could be cared for properly if the dads worked full time and if there was no one else that could look after them. Now, Ben was a miner, like we shared earlier, and he was working really, really long hours, anywhere from 10 to 12 to 14-hour shifts every day. So in reality, who is going to care for his baby daughter while he's at work? But on the other hand, he didn't want to lose her. Like he told Maureen, it nearly broke his heart to think about that. Now, Ben suddenly died in a mining accident, like very soon to the birth of his daughter Amanda. It was either a landslide or a cave-in. And after the passing of his wife, his baby daughter was still in the Prem nursery. But now in spirit form, Ben found himself visiting the hospital and the nursery where he had last seen his baby daughter. Now we're talking around about 2018, So that's a long time since the 1920s. Ben has been coming to the hospital all those years, all those decades, wanting to see his baby daughter. Like, it just gives me tingles when I tell this story every time. His grief and the loss of his wife were compounded by his daughter's disappearance. And like his emotions, his emotional imprints that you hear me talk about all the time, they kept him stuck here in this earth's reality. So we're going to fast forward now to 2019. And this is when Maureen first saw Ben, and then when I talked to Maureen. Now, she communicated with the minor dad. Like, Ben was very open about communication, and Maureen is very psychic in the sense of seeing, hearing, feeling. She's got all the senses happening. Now, Maureen and I sat there thinking about how can we help reunite Ben, his wife, and their daughter Amanda. And we were thinking, if Ben is visiting the nursery, we could call on Amanda to come and collect her dad from there. And we thought that is where he would expect to find her. So we thought that would be a really practical way to bring them all back together again. So set on this idea later that night at the 8 p.m. when the dads are allowed in the nursery, we waited for Ben. And very soon, Maureen saw him appear, as clear as day, again just standing so quietly, so patiently, waiting to see his daughter. Maureen had already been talking to Amanda, and she shared with Ben that his daughter was here now in spirit form, and she was with her mother, and they both longed for him to come and join them. And it dawned on Ben, like in that moment, Maureen said that she could see his face lit up. He could hardly believe it. They were there for him. She said his smile was enormous. It went from ear to ear. And I'm standing there, like I can feel the energy of the spirits. I don't see them often, don't hear them often, but I could feel what was going on. And I suddenly felt a shift in Ben's energy from despair and grief-stricken to elated and excited. Maureen said that Ben looked peaceful, and she said that he just simply closed his eyes and he surrendered himself to the light. Like, wow, I get tingles. Like I said earlier, I'm tingling all over sharing this with you. And Maureen said that she could see the family. They were reunited, they were hugging, they were a family unit again. It's so heartwarming to think that family members can find their way back to each other. I love sharing these stories. There are just so many different aspects. And today you've heard 4 different ways that people can be seen, can be heard, can find someone in this reality that hears them, that acknowledges them, and helps them to find their way to be with their families in the afterlife. So in episode 56, we're exploring children and ghosts, and why children sense the paranormal more than what adults do, or really want to sometimes. I'm going to share my thoughts and observations on kids and why they are so open to the supernatural world around us. And I'm going to share a rather interesting local Tasmanian experience with you, shared by a mum, as she was given this information by her very, very observant 6-year-old son. And what we did about this entity, this intruder that was traipsing about the house. So you're going to find that rather interesting. So I will see you again next week. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. You can email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.